Hey everyone, I'm the host of the Coffee People and Coffee Smarter podcasts, Ryan Woldt. We don't do advertisements during our episodes, and that is thanks to the support we receive from Roastar Coffee Packaging. Please check them out at roastery.com. That link in the show notes or in our newsletter. And now, on to the show. And I'll get started by saying, hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. This show is presented by our friends at Roastar Coffee Packaging, which you can find online at roastery.com. The Coffee People podcast is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network. We have this show, Coffee Smarter. Head to roastwestcoast.com to check it out, find recaps of this episode, and so much more. If you haven't poured yourself a cup of coffee, now is the time. Our guest today is Ben Helt from the Specialty Coffee Association. You may have heard of them. You can also find them online and him specifically at education.sea.coffee. And of course, we'll have those links in our podcast show notes. Ben, welcome to the Coffee People podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
I actually tried to connect with you at SEA in Chicago, and everything was chaotic, and I'm sure you were running around like a madman.
Yeah, I know. We always have our goals of who we're going to meet up with there, and we always fall short and always meet with people that we had no idea we were going to meet with there.
It's such an exciting event in that you just have this energy of people and all the different things they're doing in coffee and sort of seeps in. I think it takes months and months for me to realize what it is I took away from it. Because in the moment, you're just go, go, go.
Yeah.
I'm hoping you can share with us. Let's just get started with what is it that you do at SEA? You know, where you're located, and who are you, Ben?
I guess we can start with that role, and then we'll pick up some other things along the way. I think it's important to note that everything that the Specialty Coffee Association does is about education, all of it, right? Including trade shows like the Specialty Coffee Expo and World of Coffee and those things. It's all about, online white papers, online events, webinars, printed materials like 25 Magazine, event workshops, all of those things are all about education. And within that world, we also have certificate programs, certificate courses. And so if you want to learn about and be trained about job skills, like relevant job tasks when it comes to actually touching coffee, and get a certificate that says you took a training and passed some tests associated with that training, that's what our certificate programs are. And we don't deliver these programs. Like there's never a time where the SCA delivers one of these courses. It's done through a network of authorized trainers around the world. And we have about 2,000. And currently my job with the SCA is running the AST program, which stands for Authorized SCA Trainer. So I work with those 2,000 trainers around the world to deliver these certificate programs. And so part of it is train the trainer. Part of it is also authorization. So I run the whole credentialing process of becoming an authorized trainer. And then as part kind of compliance officer to make sure that the trainer network is complying with the policies and procedures of the system. So that's what I do.
It's a big task. I think there's a lot that goes into education and understanding what these programs, what their value is to people around the globe. And I want to get into that. But before I do, I'm kind of hoping to learn a little bit more about you. You have some first kind of coffee experiences that really stand out or that you made you think, oh, this is something interesting.
Yeah. I grew up in the Midwest of the United States. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, which is right in the middle of the United States. And I think like many of my peers, we were introduced to coffee through our grandparents and our parents. And it was this practical morning ritual that you may get a taste of every once in a while. It just tastes like burnt matches and like old grain. It's like really not pleasant. It seemed like it was more of a rite of passage to becoming an adult. Like once you can handle this, then you're an adult kind of coffee experience. So this would be obviously the earliest memories. And then for just decades was aware of it, but not a coffee enthusiast, not someone who pursued coffee, probably because obviously I hadn't been exposed to something I liked, And I would say around, I guess in the early 2000s, started to become more interested where I would purposefully have some coffee. And then I would say around 2004, 2005, had some of my earliest specialty coffee experiences, and both espresso and drip brew. And probably like many, some of those earliest memories of a natural process coffee from Ethiopia was a trigger for me, but then also espresso, particularly espresso macchiatos, which I kind of came into coffee in the lineage of David Schomer. And for those who may not know who David Schomer is, from Seattle, one of the pioneers of many things in coffee, particularly manipulating equipment to engage in a real ristretto style espresso. And I feel like Broadway coffee here in Kansas City kind of took that. And then that was also, I guess, the lineage that I took when it came to opening up my roasting company and cafe, was following that same kind of approach of real ristretto espresso, super thick. We're talking a lot of grams in and a lot out. Triple baskets, obnoxious 1-to-1 ratios of these things. Fruit, but baked fruit and blackstrap molasses type of things. And I think when I was first exposed to a macchiato made with that style of espresso, with steamed half and half, that predates the days where we were trying to put latte art on top of macchiatos. So there was still a license to have a really balanced texture of that. Oh, it's just like coffee candy, in a cup. Loved it. And so I think that those were some things that kind of sent me on the path of specialty coffee. But what got me into coffee was more about creating a missing piece of the community I was in. A place where you could have this cultural exchange, have a place that offered all the things that cafes offer. It was just missing from the suburb that I lived in. And so for me, I got into coffee for the love of community, and then over the years fell more in love with coffee than my community at that time, So
when you were describing that coffee, I was having flashbacks of my own visits to the family farm when I was a kid in Wisconsin, and like that 4:30 a.m. wake up call, and like hearing the coffee being brewed and smelling it. And even though I wasn't drinking it, the adults were drinking it. And then I was waiting for them to come up the steps to yell at me to get up. But at that time, I remember thinking, oh, there's something hearty and something fulfilling, something emotionally fulfilling about this thing that they're doing in the mornings.
Yeah. Similar experience of visiting my other, like I was thinking of a certain set of grandparents, but visiting the other grandparents in northern Missouri, which might as well be Iowa, And there's still times where if the right AM radio station comes on with some of those classic country, I can almost taste that coffee, just associating it with that AM radio station.
Those AM radio stations only exist in certain parts of the country anymore because we're all so focused. We all have streaming and all the different things. But sometimes when we're on a long road trip and you hit this dead zone and you turn the radio on, and that's all that's coming in, and it does send you back. I get that same feeling when I hear like kind of a crackly 1950s doo-wop music, because I think of my dad and I driving to the EAA air show in Oshkosh, and we had this bench seat in the car, and it'd be
Uh-huh.
late at night, and that's what he would listen to on the drive home, and I'd be a little kid listening to that. And I can
Love
still
that.
remember that emotion. You mentioned that when you started your own coffee company, it's a big jump from having that first, like, oh, I really like think this is cool and I'm into it, to
Mm-hmm.
wanting to build a community. At that time, was it more about building community in the suburb that you lived in, or was the coffee, component? And now obviously you're invested and you're part of this specialty culture. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time, was that something you were aware of, or was that something that grew as you grew with that business?
It's a good question. I think if I speak specifically to the specialty coffee or specialty nature of coffee at the time, I was in on that specifically. But that doesn't mean I knew what I was doing. This is not the story of the home roaster who was using an air popper or whatever we had at those times and then trying to grow that into a business. This is not that story. I mean, I was a first time business owner, first time barista, first time roaster all at the same time, which is not a good idea. That is not a good path to go, but I mean, it's possible. But the community that I was opening this up in was what we would call a first tier or inner ring suburb. So it was one of the first suburbs built from urban flight, right, from Kansas City proper out, and then over the years started to suffer the same fate of people continuing to move out. And I worked for the school district there for quite a while in the community relations and public relations department. That's my pre-coffee profession. And I'm going to kind of skip the details of that journey and just say I got to a place where I found that it was better to try to build a community that attracts the right or the next generation as compared to trying to keep the current generation from leaving, right? So creating a space where you would attract the kind of committed community members that you would like. And for me, uh, that combined with an entrepreneurial seizure led to getting into coffee from there. We weren't quite ready to be the bar owners in the family, right? The nightlife was another piece that was kind of missing from this community. But coffee at that time kind of seemed like it would be that nice vice kind of space and would give us an opportunity to create a place for that culture exchange to happen. For example, if you wanted to see some artwork in our community, you would have to see it in a high school. A bank, maybe a local bank, would have some things on display. And from time to time, like the cafe within a grocery store might have something there. And that was it, and that was a piece that we felt was missing from our area. Now, that running in parallel with seeing what was happening in the specialty coffee world at the time, we were committed to not just being a cliche, right? And we spent a lot of time visiting places to see what was just, cafe for cafe's sake, right? And obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but let's take the Friends, like the cafe on the TV show Friends, right?
Sure,
We
the
were
perk.
we were wanting to stay away from Central Perk, right? And be on the forefront. So not following the trend, but trying to figure out where is the trend headed and start there with it. This particular suburb was often lampooned, so like if a comedian came to town and asked the people working there, like, what's the town that fits this mold for this joke I've already got going on? This would be the town they would tell them, right? And so we knew that we wanted to set it up in a way that could kind of transcend that a little bit if we could, and which was one of the reasons we decided to roast. At that time, the vast majority of cafes in Kansas City were serving Broadway coffee, the roastery, PTs, Starbucks obviously was there. And then there were some small local roasters, but they weren't predominant at the time. And but then continued to grow. And we wanted our town to be producing something that went out, not being part of a network from somewhere else, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So we wanted to produce that ourselves. And so that's what made us decide to take the path of roasting. Now, at that time, no one in the coffee industry would work for me. Like I, put out the word, asked, and they said, "You're doing what? Where?" No thanks, And so we opened with a brand new staff, had to invest in a lot of training being brought in. In fact, I think there was only one member of our staff that had worked in food service before, and she had
Oh,
worked at
wow.
McDonald's for a while. So we used a lot of that knowledge that she picked up from working in a franchise to make that work. Now, over time, I think once people saw what we were doing, then I built some favor within the coffee community. In particular, I found out that a lot of people who worked in coffee lived around me, who worked downtown, worked in these other places. They were our neighbors and would come in. And if you're humble enough to listen to what they're telling you as consumers and as friends, you can learn a lot. And then some of them came to work for me. And so I'm one of those people who learned everything I learned about the basics of coffee in the beginning. I can credit the people I hired with teaching me that and kind of leading the way. And then I did my best to give them the freedom to push the envelope where they could in those spaces with our customer base. And, 8 to 9 years later, was able to sell the wholesale part of the business. And that's what became, or the family that bought the wholesale portion of my business, that became Messenger Coffee here in Kansas City. And so my green coffee buyer and my roaster went with that business to join them. And then I was able to sell the retail part of the business to a couple that had met working for us and got married, and then took over the business for a few years.
There's a great management value, leadership value in recognizing talent, recognizing people that might know more or be better at it than you, and this isn't necessarily it is a management skill, but it's something I really struggle with, but giving up the control to them to
Oh,
do
yeah.
the thing that represents you.
Oh, absolutely.
I trust you, but also it's my name on the door or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to really trust you and understand.
Absolutely.
So I commend that. How did that turn into, and I know we're skipping some things here, but
Mm-hmm.
how did that turn into you connecting with the Specialty Coffee Association and transitioning into a more facilitator educator role, and then a step up even further into educating educators?
Yeah. Well, my pre-coffee career in the world of education and doing some adult education, and then a lot of training within that role of those who were kind of frontline personnel in school districts, made it a natural fit to take what I had learned in my experiences of owning and operating a roastery and cafe and training my staff, learning of this, just the subject matter expertise in coffee combined with just a natural inclination and leaning towards training, right? And recognizing how important that is. After selling the businesses and getting out, um, there's a lot of decisions to be made about what your post business life is going to look like, right? And for me, I was able to connect with a couple here in Kansas City that are kind of the premier providers of coffee technician services here, and they wanted to get into providing training within the Specialty Coffee Association of America at the time. And at that time, the Specialty Coffee Association of America and the Coffee Quality Institute were collaborating on creating certified campuses around the country and world where Specialty Coffee Association of America certificate courses and Q grader licensing programs could take place. And this is very early on. And so I joined Workbench Coffee Labs here in Kansas City to open one of these early campuses. And that's what gave me an opportunity to get exposed to those who were working in the education department of the Specialty Coffee Association of America at the time, and started doing some contract work for them. There were some opportunities where I felt like my skill set could be helpful, and they did it as well. And so jumped in helping with that. My full-time job after finishing up that work at that campus was selling green coffee to coffee roasters with Anthem Coffee Imports here in Kansas City. And that was a fun journey. So for a while, I was working full-time selling green coffee and part-time contracting to organize online education for the Specialty Coffee Association of America. and then became the Specialty Coffee Association after the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe and America merged and unified. And then at one point just decided to go full time with the Specialty Coffee Association. And I thought I would still maybe dabble in selling some green coffee, and I was wrong. There was no capacity for like the Specialty Coffee Association was taking a whole of me for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that, maybe being busy is part of the answer to my next question. But just kind of stepping back one click there.
Mm-hmm.
When you sell your business, you sell the wholesale, you sell the retail, and you're looking at the next step in your career, relatively young still.
I'll take that.
I think, it's weird to think, but like,
yeah,
the years add up, and all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, well, I did this and I did this and I did this. But you were in a place, and this is something I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of coffee people experience as they grow through the industry. You were an owner and somebody leading a team, and your identity gets wrapped up in that somewhat, right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel that now, even though I don't have a team now and I don't own, I own the show, but I don't have a restaurant or a business like that. How have you filled that? How did you find a new identity? Was it because you were so busy you didn't have time to think about it? Or was it, okay, that was my life, and now I'm moving into this phase where I'm teaching again or I'm selling again, and I'm okay letting that drift away. But I think there's always part of you that feels an ownership pull, and it's a character trait to some extent. And identity, I think, I struggle with, and I am always wondering how other people manage those transitions in their life.
Yeah, this is really an interesting question. And thinking about, I guess I might have a little bit of a different take on it with my experience. I think over my journey, I found out something to be true that somebody told me when I started. One of the first steps that I took, just because of my experience in the community and being involved in the chamber and in the business community from the school district perspective, was put together an advisory board of local business people that I knew, just to kind of, be a sounding board and advise. Well, I guess an advisory board providing that advice for me along the way. And several of them mentioned how lonely it is to be an entrepreneur, right? To be the boss, to be the person who writes the checks. And you're surrounded by great people, including your staff, including your family and others. But there's a loneliness aspect that is hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. In the same way that parents are told they're going to grow up fast, and you believe them when they say this, and then it happens to you and you're like, oh yeah, that's crazy how fast that happened. So like, even if you believe it when somebody says it, experiencing it is something different. And so there's something that is akin to trauma over that time from being in those positions and seeing the toll that it takes on you as a person and the toll it takes on your family, especially retail. Retail just takes a whole of a person, and I'm not just talking about numbers of locations. I mean, just like being involved in retail is just completely absorbing, particularly if you don't have experience in it. Maybe the second endeavor is a little bit easier than the first, because so many of us, especially in the coffee world, we don't do the math in advance. Like if you ask people how many of these things they need to sell in order to hit what they need to put in their bank account, it's hard to get the right answer, for that.
Well, there's so many variables that you don't account for that are unexpected.
Absolutely. That's true. And that's if you do the math. You find out that there's so many variables, and some just don't, and just place hope in their intent, to get there. I think over my years in the cafe, working in it, because I was a working barista and roaster at times, I think I found that even though I have a degree in public relations, that maybe engaging the public is not right for me. Like that's not where I fit, and I felt like I was really getting burnt out to the point where I started to kind of despise our regulars, like your regulars would come in and be like, oh, this guy, like where you just kind of get tired, mostly because maybe they want a relationship that's not the relationship you were looking for. I had this desire for a relationship where I'm going to craft this delicious experience for you. I'm going to give it to you in a great place, in a great way. I'm hoping that you like it so much that you use a little profanity when you taste it or when you see it. That would be awesome. Like, I want you to love it this much, and please enjoy yourself over there at that seat, And I found that maybe there are others who wanted that relationship to be different. And I don't know if I don't think that was for me. And so I learned a lot about myself along the way as far as where I felt most comfortable. And I think what I found was I'm much more of a B2B than B2C. So much more of a business to business operator than engaging the public. And I still do some things now to make sure I'm connected to the public, right? And stay in touch with the actual act of hospitality, right? But I felt like that's something I learned about myself over time, was getting out of that. So when I think about identity issues, post business, post entrepreneur identity issues, for me, I found myself escaping. Like, we had become quite popular where we were successful. And a lot of my customer base shopped at the same grocery store where I shopped. And I found that I wanted to distance myself from that, to where if I saw one of my customers down an aisle, I'm going to the next aisle, right? Or wanting to just kind of hide from those conversations and really kind of unplug from that part of the community that we had helped build, And I feel like it took, I think it took probably about 8 or 9 years to kind of get over that. But I don't think I ever wrestled with I'm no longer an owner, loss of any kind of prestige or reputation connected to that. It was really easy for me to let go of being in that position. It was almost the opposite, to where I wanted to let go so much, I found myself letting a lot of those relationships build just kind of dwindle and fade, And so I don't think I ever wrestled with kind of a hole in my ego from walking away from ownership. I think if I experienced regret, it would be more about trying to disconnect from some of those relationships of people who showed nothing but love, right? Sure. Nothing but commitment to this thing succeeding and valuing what we were doing. But I will say also, for anyone, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm projecting. I wonder if I'm alone in thinking this way. I feel like it's a risky business to get into an entrepreneurial effort with community in mind, and hanging your hat on that. Because in those moments where it's the hardest, you'll start to be tempted to resent that community, because you may not feel like they appreciate what you're going through. They may have misconceptions about how well you're doing, right? And because you're the owner, you're doing, you must be doing great, when actually you may be just wanting to try to do as well as your baristas are doing, right, along the way. And if you go into it with, with that in mind, like with this, this intent to save a community or add that you may never get the return that you think you're going to get. So, you have to manage your own health, your own mental health, and your own expectations going into that, so you don't put yourself in a position where you end up resenting the very thing that you were looking to, help.
Two of the things you mentioned, I just want to point out to people listening, and one is the grocery store experience, running into a customer. When you are representing your business and your owner, you're always representing it. You don't get the option to have a bad day or tell someone to F off, at the grocery store, because they're going to tell someone else in your neighborhood, and they're going to tell someone else in your neighborhood, and it will eventually come back around, even if you really want to tell them that. the other part of that is, entrepreneurial mental health is still a relatively new talking point. I mean, it's
Oh.
not something that I even understood until I was breaking down mentally as an entrepreneur. And even
Mm-hmm.
then, I didn't understand it to the point where I thought it was some other problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's something that I take very seriously. And we do talk about loneliness with a lot of people on this show. And everybody is going through their thing. And all of us in different industries, and coffee in particular, are learning and growing. But people aren't going to just find you to help you, as much as that would be lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to be the one to say, you know what, I am lonely and I need to figure that out, or I need to talk to someone about it, or I need to take a step. The 12-year-old version of me used to shoot hoops in the yard and just assume some NBA scout would drive by and say, that kid, he's got something. And
Mm-hmm.
that never happened. Also, I never grew beyond 5'10". So there was a lot of factors there. And I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
jump very high or run very fast. But still, I always assumed somebody would show up. And I think at some point I realized, especially in business, I can't assume someone's coming to the
Mm-hmm.
rescue. You have to be your own rescue, and to some extent, or at least start the process. And then you'll
Yeah.
find people that want to help you along the journey. Ranting.
Fact.
Apologies. I
Yeah.
don't
No.
want to lose sight of one of the core things that I really wanted to learn from you, which is about the SCA training programs and kind of who the audience for that is. I went on the education.sca.coffee website. I could get lost just going through all the different options and say, oh, or go through when I start looking at the resources that are offered online and you're like, this is so much information. How do you convey value of the program? What value is
Mm-hmm.
there to the people taking these, and where do you start? Where do you tell people, hey, this is where you should start?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think in order to kind of understand the value of it, I think it's important for us to really define what these programs are and what they're not, right? And as I mentioned, like earlier in our conversation, you can learn about coffee all sorts of places. You can come to our events and take workshops on how to do things, make espresso, building drinks, signature drinks, learning about defects in coffee, cupping for defects, acids, all sorts of stuff. You can learn how to make a cappuccino from watching YouTube, right? There's no one owns how to do that, right? So you can there's lots of ways that you can learn these things. But what the SCA's Coffee Skills program is an assessment-based certificate program. It's always connected to a training. It's where you sign up for a training. There's an assessment that covers the key points of that training. And if you pass those assessments, you get a certificate that says you did. And it's international, right? And so these certificate programs are such that if you get a certificate here, let's say on the West Coast, you get that. It's the same test, it's the same certificate in the UK, in Bulgaria, in the United Arab Emirates, in South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, West Coast, right? It's all the same. So it has an international recognizability, and it's all based on job task analysis. Now, our certificate programs focus on, I would say, where coffee is traded from exporter to importer to the preparation of the cup. So we're not out with these certificate programs teaching farmers how to farm, right? So this is mostly on the consuming end of the supply chain, right? I'm not just saying consuming countries, but the consuming end of the supply chain around the world, right? So it's mostly connected with actually touching things, actually interacting with coffee or equipment to the most part. And so an assessment based certificate program is not a certification program. These are not professional certifications. It's a different type of credential. A professional certification would be one where the Specialty Coffee Association says that you are certified and that we stand behind you in completing specific roles within the industry. It would likely expire and there would be requirements to stay up to date, and it would be based on your professional proficiency, not specific trainings. right? It would be knowledge-based and proficiency and experience-based, not training-based. But these certificate programs are training-based. They never expire. That certificate always means you took this course and you passed these tests, right? Almost like a diploma, right? The difference between an accounting degree and a CPA, right? And so you have something that says that you've finished this, right? So I want to emphasize that, because I think when people come up to me and say, what's the value in me as a barista getting a certification? I first have to spend some time backing it out and saying, there is no SCA certified barista. Doesn't exist. There are those who hold certificates in our barista skills program, but they are not certified baristas, right? Now, these certificates, it may sound like what I'm saying is there's no value. There's high value in this. I mean, you have something that says, I've invested in this training and I passed some assessments. So, I didn't just attend. I didn't just participate, right? I've shown that I retained something and could do something I didn't do before from that. So there's value to them. And certificates have a tendency to be most valuable in marketplaces or parts of the world where they help you get into an industry, up or across the industry. So our certificate programs are the most popular in Asia, particularly South Korea, and our Chinese-speaking partners, and other parts of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, parts of Europe. The United States is always, in the top list of those who are doing it. We're a little less into paper here than maybe some other places as far as having a certificate, but it still happens, and there's a lot of folks traveling around the world to take these courses in different countries. And so that is a little bit about this process. All of it's built on job task analysis, right? So this is meant to be training that's applicable in the marketplace, in actual coffee operations. And our curriculum development director is always working towards engaging subject matter experts in a way that we're staying informed of what's really being applied in the industry so that it can better inform the content of these courses that we have. One of your questions was where I recommend people start. And a lot of that has to do with what your career goals are. That should be the driving, force of everything is, what parts of the industry do you find attractive? Or maybe you don't know yet and you want to take several of the foundation level courses to kind of find where your passion might lie or what might best match some of your natural skill sets or skill sets that you're bringing to the industry there. But that should be probably the first thing. And then we've tried over the years to maybe implement some things to help people build pathways for that. And that's where the skills diplomas come in, is meant to give people a better pathway, a better roadmap, and then better communicate what they've invested in when it comes to their training there.
I know you've recently done some pretty extensive traveling and obviously worldwide programming. Mm-hmm. Do you find that you're seeing a more universal coffee language? To me, that language is such a value to, if I'm talking about something in coffee and you're talking about something in coffee on the other side of the world, we're actually talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing that in people that are taking these trainings? It sounds like there might be some foundational things there. Whereas if you're not taking similar programs, right or wrong, I'm not passing judgment there, the language might be different because you're learning as you go on the job.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I believe that language, just English, is constantly evolving, right? But I think what's interesting is in the past 20 years of being in this industry, I do think there has been more of an alignment in the language that we use for many reasons. I think that the early work of the Specialty Coffee Association of America and the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe, before I got involved, in addition to ICO, right, International Coffee Organization, and World Coffee Research and Coffee Quality Institute, all of their activities, I think, have helped lead towards more conversations. And the more conversations we have, the more I think we find commonplace in the language that we use. And that's before 2008. When did Facebook start? 2008? 2007?
I don't know.
Somewhere
It
in there,
feels
I
like
think.
it's always existed.
I feel, yeah, that's true. I guess maybe when adults became aware of it, before my mom joined, but after, the kids in school. Social media, I think, with the advent of Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, others, and now TikTok and things that have like helped amplify the conversations that we're having, podcasts, right? All of this, these new methods of content and conversation that are happening. I do think that there is more common ground when it comes to the language we use. I'm not sure how far that should be taken, as far as like attempts to create a calibration of sorts around the industry. I don't know what impact that may have on promoting advances towards a more sustainable coffee industry or stifling it. I don't know. It's kind of out of my wheelhouse a little bit, but I do find that it's not hard to have conversations about coffee around the world. There's a lot more in common that we have discussing coffee than not in common. So the culture shocks that I experience in my travels don't have a lot to do with coffee. That seems to be the commonplace.
One of the things I think you might be an expert on, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Why is it that the Kansas City Royals can win a World Series and the Milwaukee Brewers can't? I've been really struggling with this for about 40 some years.
What a great question. And I don't know if I have that answer. Yeah.
Just pointing out that you're in the middle of the country. You mentioned that earlier, Midwestern. We have culturally some perspectives of the middle versus the coasts, and a lot of that I think is evened out and has become less so because of social media and because of the internet, because we're seeing things happening. They're happening faster in the middle than they used to. Or even first. There's innovation, a lot more innovation than people realized. I think it was always there. We just didn't see it as often. Wasn't getting attention. I'm wondering kind of about that. Obviously, you've chosen Kansas City as, it's your home. It's where you're based. Are we seeing that people are feeling like, hey, I don't have to go to this bigger market to do something? Are you seeing that? You travel quite a bit. Or are you seeing that, as you said, you got into coffee to create something in your community? Are we reverting back to that a little bit? Especially, I mean, this is kind of a bigger economic question about people and housing and cost of housing, but finding their more affordable communities and building the thing they want there. That's not related to your role in SCA or anything, but I just find it curious to ask people in different parts of the world.
I may need you to help me with that question again.
Sure.
Covering a lot of ground.
I go very broad. Do you see, at least in your region, people looking to continue what you did, say, at the beginning of your career, creating things in these smaller communities, but with the benefit now of a lot more awareness of what's out there?
Yes. I should clarify it. And I think that this is important for me to note.
Yeah.
I get up at 5:30 a.m., right? And the very first thing I'm doing is reacting to my colleagues in Asia, right? And so catching up with them because it's about 7 o'clock at night for them. So I'm trying to catch them before they're completely gone, right? And then I'm working my way back in the time zones. And I'm probably 3/4 of a liter in on coffee by 8 o'clock or so. And so then there's a magic hour where I'm online in meetings as the folks come on in California, and we're still trying to catch people in Dublin in the UK. And so the morning time is kind of the magic hour for us to meet and have these conversations, which means I drink a lot of coffee at home. Right. So I'm consuming the majority of coffee, especially coffee that I have from my home setup, which pretty good. Right. So it's good. That's fine. And I find that I am really plugged in to the coffee industry. Right. It's what I do everywhere but Kansas City. Like, I've got still have connections, still get out and teach some here. Obviously, there's a lot of people who have been in this industry for a long time around Kansas City, and they always have my back all the time. But it's easy for me to go into a cafe and not know the person behind the counter, and so I don't get to visit the shops in our community as much as I would like. But when I become aware of them, I am so proud of what I see happening in our community here. And, when we were in Chicago, right, visiting some places there where people weren't just shooting for what they've seen and just being like, I want to plug in at the status quo or, like join the trend, but definitely a move towards pushing it forward, right? Risking a little bit. And I see that risk. Sometimes that risk doesn't work out. Maybe sometimes it's a little too much and it goes past what the community is ready to support. Just like, let's just take acidity in coffee. And sometimes we have a tendency to engage so much in pursuing maybe a little too much acidity than what our paying market will get down with, risks like that. I see people taking, right? And the experience and in the coffee itself. So to your question, are people continuing to do that? I think yes. And I think it's not different than what I did. Like, I don't think it's different now. I just think that there's more to draw from. There weren't Google reviews. There was no Yelp when I started. Like, I came from the school of you don't respond to comments,
What a
right?
lovely world that would have been.
Yeah, now that's changed. Now you respond to reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least there for a while we did. I think we've kind of moved past that now. But like, I didn't have that. So I think if I think about your question, I still think people are doing those things in I'm going to use the term evangelical. And I don't mean it in a religious sense, but bringing more specialty coffee experiences with unique attributes to places where you wouldn't expect them to be. So I think that that's happening. And I think what you were saying was, do they just take what they know? Is that the way you phrase it? You were kind of speaking to taking what they're learning and what they're seeing and applying it where they are to create that sense of community and bring specialty coffee to places that are kind of unexpected. I think that that's absolutely happening. And I think they have more available to them to be successful now than certainly we did. And like, if we talk about the extrinsic attributes of coffee, the things that coffee can't tell us, right? Branding, packaging, certifications, story, flavor descriptors on a bag, those kinds of things. I mean, when I got in, roasters our size, trying to get coffee where you knew more than just the country, like where you could get it like from a certain farm or a certain co-op, or even knowing where the dry mill was, like it was almost impossible for somebody our size. Now the big boys, PTs, Roastery, Intelligentsia, Broadway, like those who had a higher volume, I mean, they had the power to be able to get that information, but not us, Now, I mean, there's so much information available where you can leverage that extrinsic information much easier now than you could have before as a small operation, and bring that connection to the consumer in a way that we just could not do in 2005, 6, 7, kind of in that area.
Speaking to that community building or that cafe that's opening up and having all these new resources, somebody comes to you in Kansas City before they go down that path and they say, Ben, I respect what you've done. You had the restaurant experience, the cafe experience, you've got the training experience. What advice would you give them if they said, I want to get started? What's something you've learned along the way that you feel is essential that I know before I
Oh,
step off the cliff?
hmm yes. So zeroing in on just those couple pieces of advice is always difficult, and based on who's talking to you, those kinds of questions. Anyone who brings this up to me, I'm going to spend some time trying to talk them out of it to begin with, and that was a key thing that happened when the whole economic collapse of 2008. I had more than one might expect come into the cafe. And I'm sure other cafe owners had the exact same experience where somebody comes in and I say, I'd love to sit down with you sometime and pick your brain about, I'm going to be leaving my job at X corporation, or I've been let go, or I'm going to retire early. And just thought it'd be really fun to have a cafe. We thought maybe we would settle down and just have this. And
This fun,
those
leisurely operation.
retirees, I'm like, enjoy your retirement. Don't do this. This is a terrible way to. I'm sure there's some exceptions out there, but on the net, it's not a great idea to take your retirement savings and invest them into a single cafe. And I would spend most of my time trying to be as real as possible about the challenges that this can bring, just in a business sense, and then the risks that you would have to guard against when it comes to your family, your own mental health. Um, some of those realities, I think, is a lot of what the first discussion would be. Now, when it comes to the actual advice portion of things, after I've hammered them with all of the reasons why they shouldn't do this, if they're still sticking around by then, I think something that I believed in from very early on, and I'm having a hard time remembering the name of the book. It's dated now. Oh, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. You familiar with
Uh-huh.
this?
Yep.
There's a piece of a concept in there, which is that the best model for any business is a franchise model. And I'm not saying buying into a franchise, but building your business in a way that if you had to duplicate it, you could, right? Through processes and systems, and thinking everything through from the moment they step on your property until they're out, right? And thinking through that process. I think approaching a business from that point of view is super smart, right? So that you're building it in a way that if you had to duplicate it, you could. And so we would talk a little bit about that. And then as far as, other advice for those who wanted to get into coffee. Huh.
Well, I would just add on to what you just said, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about those processes, but writing it down, tracking it
Oh,
somewhere.
yeah,
Right. I
absolutely.
mean, that's something that I did think about those things, but I didn't always
Mm-hmm.
write it down as I was doing it because I was busy doing it. And I look
Mm-hmm.
back sometimes and go, oh my goodness. And then when you do take that moment to reflect, you can go through, and if there's 10 checkpoints, maybe you remember 8 or 9 of them, but there's always going to be something in there that comes up later. And you're like, oh,
Oh,
I forgot
yeah.
that.
In doing the math, we were just talking about writing down processes and
Yeah.
procedures, but doing the math and writing down what your goals are. Like, what do you want your salary to be? Like, what do you want to take home? What's reasonable? Maybe have some levels, and then back that out. Yes, there's a lot of variables, right? But if you don't know the goal, those variables won't matter. And it's going to be easy for you to waste money as an owner, not realizing that every time you spend more than you should have, you're spending your own money. That's coming out of your salary every time that there's waste, and thinking through the math and making sure that you are, financed well to survive. Because when you jump off of that diving board, you take a couple bounces and then you jump into the water. It's all about making it back up to the surface before you run out of air, right? And I feel like a lot of people aren't calculating how high the diving board is before they jump in, and whether or not they're going to be able to make it to the top. And we're kind of talking retail, but I feel like a common thing that I see, and it's been a few years. I mean, shoot, it's been close to 8 years since I was selling green coffee to coffee roasters. But the number of people that I saw buy a 2 to 3 kilo roaster, sometimes a 5, right? They'd have that roaster. They'd have Scott Rouse book. Let's go. I got a name. I've got these 3 things. Let's do this and start off and not know how many bags of coffee they're going to need to sell in order to upgrade to that 12 kilo that they think they're going to be able to make money to get. And unfortunately, now it's possible. I've seen it happen. Rarely. But the amount of roasting that you're going to have to do on a 2 to 5 kilo machine to bank money to purchase other equipment is going to be such that you're going to have spent so much time roasting and so little time selling that coffee that you never really catch up, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. I think that there's, first off, when other entrepreneurs tell me that they have a certain salary they want, I say, wait, you're getting paid?
Yeah. I said your goals. Doesn't mean that you're going to get them anytime soon. But yeah.
I think where I was kind of going off is I started doing math in my head of it's not just the math for what I have to do today. It's the math for what I'm expecting to do a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Is my goal that this is my life for the foreseeable future? Is it a short-term play? And ultimately, I think there's just so many variables. As you're talking, I'm going, oh, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And you're right. It's a general piece of advice, but I think it comes back around to where we started, which is if you give people the reasons that they shouldn't do it and they stick around, that's like your first test. But if it's easy to talk you out of it, you really probably didn't want to do it in the first place. It's just this romantic ideal.
Yeah. And I think that just happens. Small business is hard. I mean, it's just hard. I mean, and I'm not just limiting that to coffee. It's just difficult to compete with corporations. And I'm not saying corporations in a bad way, but if you're competing with a company that can produce cups for half a cent, or like 2 pennies, and you're spending, anywhere between 35 cents and 65 cents per paper cup. That's hard, to expect to have a level of success where you're able to pay yourself and get a reserve where you can then grow. Going back to that roaster example, where it's like there is a minimum capacity or a minimum scale that I think sometimes both roasters and cafe owners don't prepare themselves to have the capacity to do it. For example, like only having one barista at times where you might need 1.5 instead of just going for that 2 to make sure that the customer that you have is taken care of in a reasonable amount of time, to go on out. And assuming that you're going to be able to grow later. I've known some extremely successful cafes that the only limiting factor to their daily take was the size of the parking lot. If they had 10 more spaces, they'd have 10 more cars rotating in and out of there, But that's not a really great example to go from barista to parking lot. But like taking a look at those goals and making sure is the scale of your operation, can it ever help you achieve that goal?
Sure. Where's your ceiling? At this level, and Absolutely. Can you break through it if you need to? Ben, we've already gone well past the time I expected today. No, don't apologize. I feel like we could do a part 2 easy enough, but I want to make sure that I get to the last 2 key things, which is 1, did we miss anything? Is there anything today that you wanted to tell people that we didn't get to?
Well, as I think about the advice part of things, I think a lot of what I've been learning lately is about opportunities when it comes to training and things that we can be doing in our cafes and our operations that can make training a little bit better. It's a whole nother conversation, though. But I think as I look back on my experience, I think there's a lot of things I did really well when it came to training. And I think there's a lot of things I've learned in the past 10 years where I'm like, if I ever did it again, here's how I would approach training a little bit differently. But let me take a look at this list. I don't know if no, I think I've enjoyed the conversation.
Oh,
I
well,
think it's
thank you.
good. I know that we've spoken in some generalities here. I hope that that hasn't been frustrating for you or
No,
the
I think
audience.
we get an
Yeah.
hour to start, usually 45
Uh-huh.
minutes, and maybe come back someday and we can delve in a
Awesome.
little more specifically. When you are out traveling, you do get out of the house.
Hmm.
What do you order at the coffee shop?
Oh, coffee. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So my favorite, like I love it when shops offer two different drips on tap. And then also manual brews in addition to that of a menu that I can choose from. But I love it when they offer those two. And so typically I'll choose one to drink in a full cup and then get a sample of the other, especially if they have one that's a little more adventurous and one that's a little more like a hug and a high five. I'll choose between one of those and then get a sample of the other. Um,
I think that's
Abroad,
the name of your next coffee shop, a hug and a high five. You just
yeah, there we
came up
go.
with it
Yeah,
there.
TM, that's me. Yeah, copyright. That's if drip is available. But I really love drip coffee. That's kind of my jam. And then if that's not available, usually an americano in places where that's the option. I'm not really into cold brew. I'll do it for quality control purposes, or to try it for someone, but it's not something that I would order. And I've been kind of cutting back on dairy a little bit when it comes to those. But if I do order, if a place makes macchiatos with half and half, or does their cappuccino in a 6 ounce with high milk fat, milk, high fat content milk, then I'm in for that. But not much of a latte drinker, I would say.
We've spanned the gamut today, Ben. It's been just a real pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah,
And
same
one
here.
thing I like about this conversation has been that it's sent my brain off into a million different directions that I'm going to be marinating on for the rest of the day.
I'm sorry.
Uh, no, that's the best part of it. To everyone else listening, you can find all the links we chatted about in today's episode, including the one to education.sca.coffee, in our podcast notes, in our newsletter, which comes out every week. You can find the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the places. Like and subscribe. All those algorithms sort of work together, I think, now. A shout out to Roastar. Thanks for enabling us to tell these stories and talk to people like Ben. Anything else, Ben?
Yes. Can I tell you
Yeah,
some more
absolutely.
about
Please.
something? You mentioned some of the travels that I've had lately, including our Educator Summit, which I talked about a little bit. But the Educator Summit is an event we do to help people who teach coffee teach better. There's a lot of
Hmm.
events out there that help people increase their subject matter knowledge of coffee, but this is all about helping you be a better trainer and a better teacher. That's been an amazing event that we had two of in the United States and then one in the exact same program in Korea, South Korea, um, Thailand, and Taiwan. There's going to be a whole nother season of those in 2025. But a most recent trip to World of Coffee Dubai, we are starting to roll out a new lesson plan for a workshop. And I'm bringing this up because it's going to be accessible by everyone. Ryan, you could raise your hand and say, I would like to be a registered instructor for this workshop, and then do some studying, pass an exam, and you would be given this entire lesson plan. And it's an intro to cupping workshop within the perspective of the new coffee value assessment system. So it's approaching tasting coffee through the act of cupping, through both our descriptive assessment and an effective assessment. So, what is this coffee objectively, and who might value it, right? Who likes what this coffee is? Me, and then also my expert opinion for other markets. And I just want to share that this exists because I think it's going to be valuable for anyone who works for a wholesale roaster and does education for their wholesale accounts, and introducing people to the sensory analysis of coffee through cupping and those things. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. It's a ready-made 3 to 4 hour workshop that people are going to be able to get really easily compared to anything else we've done before. And so I just wanted to share that that's something that I'm particularly excited about. I did a beta test of it here in Kansas City with about 18 baristas and roasting employees, and then did the pilot project in Dubai. And that's going to be something that's launched around Expo in April. And I think anybody who's interested in having that ready-made workshop for their operation, that's what this is designed for.
Very cool, Ben. I'll make sure that we get that information out to people and the links when it's available, of course.
Awesome.
Thank you to everyone for listening to us share another story of a coffee person. And thanks to you, Ben, for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Everyone else, please tip your baristas and be sure to drink good coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey there, everyone. Thank you for coming back for another episode of our podcast. That's the show for today. Thank you to our guest for sharing their time, their story, and for dropping some knowledge on all of us. You can find a recap of this episode in our newsletter online at roastwestcoast.com. That and all the links we chatted about today are in this podcast show notes. Wherever you're listening or watching, it really helps us if you tap the follow and subscribe button on the show. And while you're there, give us a few stars if you think we've earned them. If you want to go beyond that to support the Coffee People and Coffee Smarter podcasts, please tell your friends, share these shows, or buy us a cup of coffee. There's a link in the notes. We appreciate you. We couldn't do this without our presenting sponsor, Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastery.com. They enable coffee businesses to best represent the quality coffee that they're producing. Besides enabling us to share these coffee stories, they also have a team of people who go above and beyond to ensure their customers get the support that they need. You can click the link to roastery.com in our show notes or reach out to us. We'll connect you directly. To all the industry partners who've supported us, who still support us, and continually uplift this effort to share the stories of coffee people, thank you. Thank you to everyone listening and watching this show, for asking questions, for sharing your coffee with us, and for being coffee curious. This show, the Coffee People Podcast, is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network. And this episode has been written, produced, researched, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope it's with a fine cup of coffee. Thank you for listening to us share the stories of coffee people. Cheers, everyone.